Hey everybody, this is Barry Johnson. Welcome back to another edition of Studio Talk. Today we're going to start talking about plugin subscriptions, whether they make sense or whether they don't make sense. This is going to be kind of a multi-part series because I want to dedicate a little time to each one of your typical options out there for subscribing to plugins versus buying them outright. And so to give them each their own, moment and time to really kind of consider the pros and cons of each one, because some of them do bring some things to the table and some features that others don't. I think they kind of deserve their own separate video for that. So as it kind of suggests, a lot of people really just hate the idea of any kind of subscription. I've got a video out there where I talk about Avid and their subscriptions where I have complete and utter disdain for the way they've gone about their process for subscribing to their DAW. But like anything else, all things are not always kind of created equal. We have so many tools available to us today that, quite frankly, that I didn't have even 10 years ago and certainly not 20 years ago. We're all benefiting from the increased level of technology, converters. The difference between analog to digital converters is much narrower today than it was, even 5-10 years ago. And so what that does ultimately is drive the price down for many of us to be able to get into quality recording gear at an affordable price, and so we've got to start looking at plugins and really kind of what makes sense at the end of the day. When you think about subscriptions, you kind of feel like you're flushing your money down the drain. You're not getting anything for it. It's kind of like the idea, would you rent a car every day versus buying one? Knowing that you got to turn it back in and you've got nothing, for the money that you've spent. And then you could argue there are people out there who lease cars compared to buying them. And that's a different discussion altogether. So I kind of think that distinguishes why some of these things maybe are not apples to apples, but yet apples to oranges at a time. So, the various subscription bundles that are out there from various manufacturers vary in price anywhere from basically, I'm going to round up, $15 a month up to $25 a month. And I'm talking native. There are some that go above that if you're dealing with plugins that are capable of HDX type DSP type utilization. But today I'm going to start with a company called Brainworx, okay, which a lot of times goes by the name Plugin Alliance. And there's some unique things to that particular manufacturer that some of the others don't have. They have an incredible algorithm that is proprietary to them as far as I know, where they're able to really model a piece of hardware in ways that some others out there can't. I think a lot of people would kind of argue that Universal Audio, I think a lot of people consider them the kind of standard bearer for truly creating as close to emulating the hardware as anybody can. And that was certainly true for a very long time. But today, companies like Brainworx are really kind of giving them a run for their money. And so, you have to excuse me, I'm still kind of getting over a cold here. So, so I think, it's important to take some of these things into consideration. One of the things that you've also got to look at when you're comparing, what I'll call an ROI, that's a return on your investment. Are you getting a good bang for your buck, or are you just flushing money down the drain? Is that, a lot of these plugin subscriptions, they come with all of their plugins. And some of them you can buy just certain groups or, groupings of them or whatever. But for the most part, they include all the plugins that the manufacturer offers. And if you go back to another video that I did about, how many different, EQ compressor or, basically channel strips do you really need, and at what point are they starting to get in the way of you're truly learning those plugins and truly mastering the art of utilizing them as if they were hardware, you should go out and check that. But, one of the things that you can get clouded down with when you go the subscription route is you're getting all of these plugins all at once. And depending on your level of experience and exposure to plugins and the variety of those, ultimately that can seem overwhelming. At first it can seem, oh wow, this is awesome. Look at all these great plugins. Well, the thing I would caution you on, you're going to feel the need to kind of start clicking through and start adding them all over the place to check them out. And most likely you're probably not going to end up using them in the way that they were designed or reaching their full potential, because you're probably not giving each plugin the time that it deserves. You also may have some redundancy in these plugin bundles that you've got to keep in mind too. The more invested you are in already owning plugins, the harder the decision becomes to ultimately choose whether you're going to go a subscription route or not. And so when you look at the price of your average plugins out there, they range anywhere from $50 to $300 and something for a plugin. Now, of course, that is retail, and just about every one of the manufacturers out there have sales where you can save significantly off that retail price. But even when you look at, for example, like Brainworx SSL plugin, that's over $300 if you buy that plugin. And it is a fantastic plugin. I recently talked about SSL's channel strip, as well as the UC1, and how great I really loved those plugins and the sound of that SSL channel strip. And of course, the control surface was, amazingly put together. Time will tell how much it can get utilized here in my studio, but ultimately, I really, really love those plugins. And then one of the things that a lot of people kept telling me is that you've got to try the Brainworx version of it. It's just as a lot of people were saying they even liked it better. And so I did that. I ultimately paid for a month of subscription for Brainworx and really started auditioning a lot of their plugins. And the first thing I did was take, where I had comparable plugins. If they're doing an SSL channel strip, I would pull it up against the SSL's version of it. I would pull it up against the Waves version, and so on. So wherever I could find redundancy of plugins that I already own, I started doing an apples to apples comparison, because that was the only way I could really hear the difference between the advantages or disadvantages of one versus the other. Now, understanding that a lot of these are modeled off very specific pieces of hardware, and they're not all modeled after the same. And if you know anything about analog hardware, especially the high-end stuff that this stuff typically models, you're going to get variances from one unit to the next. There's no such thing as being able to perfectly reproduce an 1176 every single time. And the older the unit, the more that's definitely the case, which is why the old Uri 1176s are so revered. And so, compared to going out and buying a modern day 1176 from Universal Audio, still a great compressor, but it doesn't have the mojo or however you say that that Uris did back in the day. And so what I found is I found all of the plugins that I've used so far with Brainworx. I've come to the conclusion that they do an outstanding job of making plugins. Now, again, this is about subscription, so you can buy those plugins or you can subscribe. And so what I would encourage you to do is demo those plugins. Really analyze how many of those plugins are you most likely really going to use. As an example, part of their plugin bundle, they have a bunch of guitar amp emulations, whether it's a 5150 or a Marshall or various amps out there. They also model like old Boss CE3 Chorus and the Boss Distortion Unit and an Ibanez Tube Screamer and a lot of those things. Now, I didn't even audition those because I'm very confident they actually sound very good, but I've got a Kemper, and so I'm always going to use my Kemper for that, and I've got effects within my Kemper. I also have an HX Stomp, not Stomp, but HX Effects that I also utilize with my Kemper to enhance the various time-based effects that I really like, and on the Line 6 unit. I also have all of that wired into my patch bay, so if I want to send a track out to the to the HX effects, I can send it out, as an insert out of Pro Tools, send it out to the HX effects, and then bring it back in and do the effect that way. And so I find that interesting. I was actually using the delay the other day, just kind of playing around with it on a couple of tracks in a session I was working on. I was just kind of playing with the idea of it, and so I got some cool kind of unique effects. Now, of course, I can get better results if I'm using, Echo Boy or something like that. But some of the other effects, I don't necessarily have the equivalent that you have in there. So anyway, so the bottom line, there's probably a certain percentage of those plugins that I'm not likely to ever use. So when you're considering these things, you kind of have to take those and set them aside. If they're not bringing value to you, or if you don't think they're going to bring value to you in a way that you're going to use them regularly, then you really can't count those plugins as far as when you're trying to base, where you're trying to base whether the subscription is worth it. So Brainworx happens to be one of the more expensive ones. It's around $25 a month. Now they have something pretty unique that some of the others don't have, is that after a year of subscribing to their plugins at $25 a month, that means you're paying $300 a year. And you say, Barry, man, I'm flushing down $300 a year for plugins. That's one way to look at it. And yes, to flushing it down, but you're definitely spending, flushing it is debatable, and that's what we're going to talk about. But, at the end of the day, if you're utilizing them a lot, you should get your money's worth out of it. But again, this all depends on how many plugins you currently own and whether you really need additional plugins or not, or whether these things are going to really improve your mixes enough to justify the expense. So anyway, but roughly you're paying $300 a year to subscribe to Brainworx. And so at the end of that year, though, they give you a voucher for $250. So you could argue that you paid $50 a year for renting, let's call it renting, because that's basically what you're doing, renting those plugins. Well, they give you that $250 voucher that you can in turn use to buy plugins. And so the question really becomes at that point, I did try to dig deep into the nitty gritty of the voucher to find out, well, is that $250? Is that based upon retail? What if a plugin's $300 and they've got it marked down to $150? Do I get to use that $250 voucher against $300 even though it's on sale for $150? That's a question I have. But you could even argue, let's say you can, and it's down to $150. Well, that means you're paying $150 a year for the plugins. And so one of the advantages to subscription is every time they come out with a new plugin or update a new plugin, you don't have to worry about paying any fees to get those new plugins. You're going to get them directly. So again, when I said before, it's really important that you consider how many of those plugins are you truly going to utilize. And then you've got to start looking at the retail value of those things. How much would you have to spend to buy those plugins? And you also have to consider, how much are they typically when they go on sale? And then you've got to compare it to that too. Because with plugins, patience is always king. Always, always, always. If you wait long enough, they'll go on sale and you'll get a deal. So it's the people out there that got to have it right now. Those are the ones that, that end up paying more. And I've been guilty of that from time to time, but I usually wait till plugins go on sale when I do buy them. At this stage of my journey in recording, I'm pretty well set on plugins. But like anything else, the technology's changing and it's advancing. There was a time when Waves was king of all of this. Now everybody laughs off Waves for good reason. And I'll have another video on Waves because they have a different way of getting you. They'll sell them cheap, but if you want to keep them up to date, you're going to pay an arm and a leg. But we'll talk about that when I talk about Waves. So anyway, their average plugin, of the plugins you're most likely going to want to use are anywhere from $200 to $300 per plugin. And so if you just bought one plugin a year over 5 years, that's $1,500, right? 5 times 3 is $1,500, or 5 times anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500. And you're only getting 5 plugins, okay? If you spend $300 a year, $25 a month, and let's say you don't even get the $250 voucher, over 5 years, you're spending $1,500, but you've had access to all of those plugins beyond just the 5 that you wanted, and you got them all immediately. And the thing with subscription is you can cancel anytime you want. If you want to put it on hiatus for a while, maybe you're busy at work, you've got a lot of things going on, and maybe over the next month you're not going to be doing much in the studio. So you just cancel it and pick it back up a month later. So where I definitely think the right, and this is key, the right subscription, because not all plugin manufacturers, in my opinion, are worth it, even at reduced prices. And again, I'll get into that as I talk about each one. But today we're talking about Brainworx. Brainworx is one of those ones, I think, depending on where you're at in your journey and how many plugins you currently own, if you really want quality plugins, some of the best that are made out there, they don't do everything better than everyone else, but they do a lot of things better than a lot of people, and they definitely hold their own in comparison where the difference is going to be marginal. I think Brainworx is worthy of a consideration for subscription. You could spend a lot of money and take a long time to buy a handful of plugins, and who's to say you're actually going to end up loving that plugin as much as you think? I bought a lot of plugins over the years that I thought I was going to use, and when I demoed them, I thought they sounded great, but I never really found, a regular application for them, or I had something else that I tended to lean on better. So is that not flushing money down the drain if I never use them? I mean, I have an extra iLock that I just move all of the old stuff that I don't even use anymore just so it doesn't get cluttered. And don't get me started on iLock, by the way. But anyway, these are things I think you need to consider. Now, if you're looking for me to talk about each plugin and how much I like them and all those kinds of things, that's not what this is about. You can demo the plugins yourself. You can come to your own conclusions in your studio with your monitors and your ears. That is the only way to do it. Watching somebody else demonstrate plugins on YouTube, although can be entertaining at times, at least pique an interest, but you're never going to know until you're listening to them in your studio, because oftentimes you're watching those videos on a phone or something like that, or you don't have good monitoring sources, even a good quality pair of headphones, or in your studio kind of checking those things out. And so it's truly hard to really truly evaluate those when you're looking at that. I think there's a time and a place. Oftentimes when I find a video that I really want to look at a little bit more, I kind of hit that button and do a save for later. Then when I'm back in my studio, then I'll come up and I'll watch it in my studio. That way I can monitor and give it the full evaluation that it deserves, minus, of course, all the YouTube algorithms that diminish the quality of audio. But anyway, there's only so much we can do about that. So I think with Brainworx, what I would encourage you to do is give that one a try. I'm not going to say that about some of the other manufacturers I'm going to bring up. There's at least one comes to mind. I'm going to tell you, don't waste your time or your money. And there's another one I'll ultimately end up doing is if you're in a certain situation, a certain set of circumstances, they make the most sense, but not everybody is going to fall into that application. I don't want to get into that here. We'll save that for another video. So I think that if you're one of these folks out there that is just die hard against subscriptions of any kind, and I certainly understand that, and there are many of them, I'm in that camp with you. I'm definitely in that camp with you. But that's not always going to be the case. I think ultimately, you got to put the pencil to the paper and do the math and see where it truly makes sense. And like I said, for somebody just getting started, and especially if you don't have a lot of resources, being, extra cash to start buying some of these plugins, it's a great way to at least starting to experience them. Even if you spend, $25 for 4 months and you get to experience them all, at least you have a better foundation of what to look for as you progress in your journey. Because I understand, people watching my videos are going to be at various levels of their journey. Some people are going to be able to say, Barry, I did that a long time ago, man. I'm already past you on that. And I understand that. And there are going to be some of you looking at me like, I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on. I'm still trying to figure out how to set my levels on my interface, whatever that may be. So, if you're in that boat, we've all been there. Trust me, we've all been there. So stick with it. You'll get it. You'll get it. Just stick with it. And so I think some of these things are worthy of consideration, especially if I'm pulling my crystal ball out there. I think we're going to start seeing. The technology is advancing at such a rapid rate that I think we're going to start seeing these plugins even get better and better and better, especially as, when we got new processors like Apple Silicon processors that when they just have their entry level, it's so freaking powerful. It's ridiculous. And then who knows what's going to happen on the next incarnation. Of course, others are going to chase Apple on the Windows side of things, and so it's going to be healthy competition. It's not an Apple versus Windows thing. Use the platform that makes you the most creative at the end of the day. But I hope this conversation, at least gives you something to think about and something to consider. Because in my opinion, there are times when subscriptions make sense, and there are times when they don't. And I don't think I'll ever be a fan of them for DAW work unless it's, really, really, truly economically viable. Because historically with DAWs is you only upgrade when you want those next features. You may skip one or two versions depending on whether you find value in them. But ultimately, you are going to pay to do that upgrade. And so what's the difference? What's the cost difference between that subscription and what you're going to pay? At the end of the day, you've got to look at it, how much are you out of pocket on any given time frame, and not necessarily the fact that you feel like you're spending money and not getting something that you hold in your hand. A lot of manufacturers are going to, or a lot of software developers are going towards subscription, and I have to imagine a lot of that has to do with, there's such a history of pirating and doing all those things, and where people are downloading that crap for free. And if you've ever done that, don't ever do it again. They put a lot of work into developing these tools for us, and they deserve to be paid for it. And so it's time for us all to be adults and really pay for what we get. And so if you've ever found yourself victim to that, or not victim to that, if you ever actually the company victim to that, if you ever found yourself doing that, I encourage you to stop and think about that and ask yourself, what if you were the person doing all the work and effort into putting that in there? Because a lot of these companies doing this, they're not mega companies. The owner of that company is not making $10 million a year. Okay, it's just not the way it works. So anyway, so kind of consider these things. I give if you're going to go subscription, I give Brainworx a thumbs up. I think the quality of their plugins are solid. I think they have an extremely good variety of plugins across the board. But again, you've got to consider how much you own right now, and that may not make sense. If you already invested in a ton of plugins, and I say, no, that subscription is not going to make much sense. Why are you going to subscribe to something when you're only going to use 2 or 3 plugins? That doesn't make any sense. But the great thing about Brainworx is at the end of that year, they're going to give you a $250 voucher. You can turn around and buy the plugin that you want. And so it's kind of a no-brainer almost because of that. And I think if some of the other manufacturers did that similarly, it would be worth it. But anyway, these are things that you've got to consider. So go out there, try the Brainworx plugins for a month. Let me know what you think. Put it down in the comment section. Tell me what you think. If you've already experienced it and you already have experience with their plugins, put the comments down there. Make everybody else feel comfortable about it. Those plugins are very popular, and I think what's it called, the Console One. I think that's what it's called. It's the controller for, I think originally for their SSL plugin. But from what I understand, there's a lot of plugins that are mapped to that. It's kind of similar to the way the layout is on my D command back there, that control surface, where it has 2 dedicated sections on it that are laid out to where all the various compressor and EQ plugins are mapped to those controls, so you can develop that muscle memory that I talk a lot about in my should you buy a control surface or not, because there are a lot of people out there that should not buy a control surface. They're not going to get the value for their money, and there are some folks out there that are going to gain tremendous efficiency with it. So check that video out too. So anyway, I hope you found this conversation interesting. Again, leave some comments down there. Tell me what you think. I've been immensely overwhelmed with the reception of these videos so far. I look every day and I'm literally floored. I actually passed 1,000 subscribers, and most of that was done within a few weeks. And so I guess I must be doing something right. I don't know. You guys got to tell me that. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this. Do me a favor. This little thing coming up down there, the like, subscribe, notify. These things are important. It helps get the algorithm out there so more and more people can get a chance to hear my ugly mug yak, yak, yak. But hopefully you find value in what I'm talking about. And hopefully I'm not dragging things out too long, because I know I can do that. So anyway, it's been a pleasure, everybody. Truly, it truly has. And I'm very thankful of the reception I've received so far. I really want you to know that, because I mean that. It's deeply, deeply, deeply humbling, and it just makes me want to try so much harder to do a great job for you guys. So guys and girls, remember I use that interchangeable. I really got to figure out a way to do that, because I really shouldn't do that. But anyway, you know where I'm coming from, and it comes from the heart. I promise you that. So anyway, You know what you should do? I think all of you, you know what you need to do? You guys all need to have a great day. And by the way, love everybody. It's important. It really is.